Imagine waking up one morning, hearing gunshots, cannons roaring, soldiers running through the streets, and before you can even finish breakfast, the war is already over. Not days, not hours, just 38 minutes. That is all it took for what many historians call history's most useless war, the Anglo-Zanzibar War. A war so short that some people didn't even realize it had started before it ended. But how does a war last less than a school lesson? Why did it happen? And why did it cost hundreds of lives in under an hour? Stay with me, because this story is stranger, more dramatic, and more shocking than you think. To understand this war, we need to travel back to the late 1800s. Africa was being carved up by European powers like a giant cake. Britain, Germany, France, and others were competing for land, resources, and influence. This period is often called the Scramble for Africa. One of the small but important places caught in this power struggle was Zanzibar, an island off the coast of East Africa. Today it is part of Tanzania, but back then it was its own sultanate, ruled by a sultan. Zanzibar was not just any island, it was rich and strategically important. It sat along major trade routes in the Indian Ocean. It had spices, ivory, and access to mainland Africa. Whoever controlled Zanzibar had power in East Africa. Naturally, the British Empire wanted influence there, so did Germany. Instead of fighting directly, Britain and Germany signed agreements dividing areas of influence. Zanzibar became a British protectorate. That meant the Sultan was still in charge, but Britain had the real power behind the scenes. For years, Britain carefully controlled who became Sultan. They wanted someone friendly to British interests. As long as the Sultan cooperated, everything remained peaceful. But peace in politics is often fragile. In August 1896, the pro-British Sultan suddenly died. His name was Hamad bin Thuwaini. The moment he died, everything changed. Within hours, his cousin Khalid bin Bargash moved quickly. Without waiting for British approval, he declared himself the new Sultan. This was a bold move. The British did not approve of Khalid. They preferred another candidate who would follow their instructions. Khalid knew Britain might oppose him, so he acted fast. He gathered supporters. He took control of the palace. He armed himself and called in loyal soldiers. By the next morning, he had around 2,800 men defending the palace grounds. He also positioned cannons and even had a royal yacht armed with weapons in the harbour. The British were furious. To them, this was not just a disagreement. It was a challenge to their authority. They immediately sent a message to Khalid: step down or face consequences. They gave him a clear deadline, 9 a.m. on August 27, 1896. If he did not surrender by then, there would be war. Imagine the tension in Zanzibar that morning. The streets were quiet but filled with fear. People watched and waited. Some probably hoped Khalid would give in and avoid bloodshed, but Khalid refused. He believed the British would not actually attack. Perhaps he thought they were bluffing. Perhaps he believed his forces were strong enough to resist. Or maybe pride would not let him back down. Whatever the reason, he stayed in the palace as the clock ticked closer to 9 a.m. Meanwhile, the British prepared for action. They positioned powerful warships in the harbour, including modern naval vessels armed with heavy guns. When the deadline passed at exactly 9 a.m., the British did not hesitate. They opened fire. The cannons from the ships roared across the water. Shells smashed into the palace. The bombardment was intense and devastating. The palace, built mostly of wood, could not withstand the attack. Within minutes it was in flames. Smoke filled the sky. Walls collapsed. Chaos erupted everywhere. Khalid's forces tried to fight back. They fired their cannons toward the British ships. But their weapons were outdated. Their aim was poor. Their training was limited. Against the power of the British Navy, they stood little chance. One of their cannons was destroyed almost immediately. The royal yacht was sunk in the harbour. Soldiers scattered. The palace burned faster with each passing minute. By 9:38 a.m., just 38 minutes after the first shot, it was over. The palace was destroyed. Hundreds of Khalid's soldiers were dead or wounded. The British suffered only one injured sailor. One. The difference in power was shocking. Khalid himself had already escaped through a back door and ran to the German consulate for protection. Yes, the man who started the war fled before it ended. In less time than it takes to watch half a TV episode, the war was finished. Britain had won easily. They quickly installed their preferred candidate as the new Sultan. Order was restored. Officially, it was a war. But compared to other conflicts in history that lasted years and killed millions, this felt almost absurd. 38 minutes. That was it. So why is it called the most useless war in history? First, it changed almost nothing. Britain already controlled Zanzibar. After the war, they still controlled Zanzibar. The balance of power remained the same. The only real result was destruction and death. Hundreds of local defenders died. The palace was ruined. Families lost fathers, sons, brothers, all for a conflict that could have been avoided. Second, it showed the huge imbalance of power during colonial times. This was not a fair fight. It was a demonstration, a message. Britain wanted to show that it would not tolerate defiance. The war lasted 38 minutes because the outcome was never in doubt. It was like a heavyweight boxer fighting a child. The result was obvious from the start, but there is something deeper here. This war reveals how pride, politics and power can lead to pointless violence. Khalid likely knew he could not defeat the British Empire, yet he still chose resistance. The British, instead of negotiating further, chose immediate military action. Neither side stepped back, and ordinary people paid the price. It also shows how the term war can sometimes feel misleading. When we think of war, we imagine long battles, strategies, campaigns, and turning points. Here, there was no long strategy. No months of planning, no drawn-out campaign. Just a deadline, a refusal, and overwhelming force. If you blinked, you missed it. Yet, despite its short length, the Anglo-Zanzibar War carries a powerful lesson about imperialism. During the late 19th century, European powers often treated African nations as pieces on a chessboard. Decisions were made in distant capitals like London and Berlin. Local rulers had limited real power. When they resisted, the response was swift and brutal. Khalid's escape to the German consulate also shows the complicated politics of the time. Germany and Britain were rivals in Africa. By protecting Khalid, Germany was quietly challenging British authority. However, even Germany did not go to war over Zanzibar. Eventually, Khalid was allowed to leave and lived in exile. The British solidified their control without further conflict. Imagine being a citizen of Zanzibar that day. You wake up to normal life. By mid-morning, your palace is burning. Smoke covers the city. Soldiers lie dead in the streets. And by lunch, a new ruler is on the throne. It must have felt surreal. Life-changing events compressed into less than an hour. The palace itself was a symbol of Zanzibar's independence. When it burned, it was not just a building destroyed. It represented the final end of real local power. After that day, British influence became even stronger. Zanzibar remained under British control for decades. The speed of the war also made it famous in history books. Military historians often mention it as the shortest recorded war in history. Some conflicts have lasted days, others weeks, many years, but 38 minutes stands alone. It almost sounds like a joke. But it was real explosions, real deaths, real consequences. The question remains, could it have been avoided? Probably yes. If Khalid had stepped down, no one would have died. If Britain had extended negotiations, perhaps bloodshed could have been avoided. But history often turns on moments of pride and stubbornness. Leaders make decisions quickly, and the results cannot be undone. There is also irony in how quickly the British declared victory. In other wars, victory is celebrated after long struggle. Here, victory was almost automatic. It was less a battle and more a punishment, a warning to others who might challenge British authority in the region. Today, Zanzibar is peaceful and beautiful, known for its beaches and rich culture. Tourists walk the same ground where cannons once roared. Most visitors probably do not realize that one of history's shortest wars happened there. The scars of that morning are mostly invisible now. When we look back at the Anglo-Zanzibar War, it forces us to think about the meaning of power. True power often does not need long battles. It can end conflicts quickly. But quick does not mean justified, and short does not mean harmless. In 38 minutes, lives were changed forever. This story also reminds us how history is full of strange events. Not all wars are grand and dramatic like World War I or World War II. Some are brief and almost forgotten. Yet they still reveal important truths about human nature, politics, and ambition. Perhaps the most tragic part is how unnecessary it all feels. The outcome was predictable, the destruction was preventable, the imbalance was obvious, and yet it happened anyway. That is why many call it the most useless war. It achieved what was already reality. It proved what everyone already knew. It destroyed what did not need to be destroyed. In the end, the Anglo-Zanzibar War stands as a powerful symbol of colonial dominance and political pride. 38 minutes of gunfire echoing through history. A reminder that sometimes the shortest wars can carry the loudest lessons. And maybe the next time we hear leaders speak boldly about strength and power, we should remember how quickly pride can turn into pointless destruction. Because sometimes history's loudest explosions last less than an hour, but their meaning lasts forever.